For centuries, churches have stood as symbols of faith, sanctuary, and salvation. But what if behind these hallowed walls lies a hidden history, a web of secret societies, esoteric symbolism, and occult knowledge that stretches back to the dawn of civilization? This isn't just speculation. It's time to connect the dots. From the architecture that whispers ancient codes, to religious icons hiding truths in plain sight, and rituals that mirror mystic traditions older than the texts themselves. The veil is thinning, and the truth is ready to be seen. This is not an attack. It's an awakening. So ask yourself, what are they really worshiping? And are we ready to face the mystery that's been kept in shadows?
I should tell you something about myself and how I got into this study of secret societies. My mother had an uncle when I was growing up who worked in the Vatican Secretary of State's office. And every couple of years he would come home and talk with the family, my father. And my mother's grandfather was a senator from the state of Florida. And when the old man would come back from the Vatican working in the Secretary of State's office, he would sit with my brother, my father and his brothers, and would talk about the intrigue going on throughout the world behind religion and politics, the mafia, underworld, and probably the biggest criminal syndicate that's ever existed on the face of the earth. We call it the United States federal government. The United States federal government is a business. And according to international maritime admiralty law, all corporations must have a president, a vice president, secretary of treasurer, and a board of directors that meets at least once a year. That's why we have a president and a vice president. So when you understand terms, you will understand that the federal government of the United States is a corporation. It's a company. It was founded by some very powerful secret societies and fraternal orders coming out of Europe. And it hasn't got a thing to do with you. Consequently, when you say that you are a U.S. citizen, what you're saying is that you are a member of a corporation called the United States. It has nothing to do with the country of America. It's a corporation. And therefore, if you make yourself a citizen of the United States, that means that you are a franchisee. And consequently, once a year, you pay the franchise tax board because you are a franchisee of a major international corporation company. Therefore, international wars are nothing more than hostile takeovers. Understand that the federal government of the United States is a corporation. It's a company. And like all big companies, the reason it got on top in a dog-eat-dog world because it's the most vicious dog in the world today. It does not mind killing, bloodshed, or anything else as long as you get the job done. However, growing up listening to my family talk about underworld, Vatican, and all of the intrigue going on throughout the world, I became interested in the religious part of this conspiratorial apparatus throughout the world. And so what I'm going to show you today, many of the clergy in churches today know, many of the rabbis in Judaism know, Billy Graham certainly knows. And when you begin to see what the so-called theology of the West is based on, you will see why it is that we are in serious trouble as a country today. Because we are a nation of believers, not knowers. Believing can lead you into trouble. It would be better to do your homework. In the Old Testament, incidentally, for your information, the Old Testament, there was not the worship of one God as we have been told. In point of fact, there's at least 5, perhaps as much as 7, different deities in the Old Testament. That requires a lot of explanation. I'm just stating that. I can prove it to you later. But in the Bible, we are told about Moses leading the Israelites out of the wilderness, and they fed themselves on manna from heaven. Manna from heaven, the Bible says, developed each morning in the morning dew. When the dew would rise in the morning, the Israelites would go out and pick manna. The word manna simply meant, what is it? Because when they first tried it, they didn't know what it was, so they called it, what is it? In Hebrew was manna. But the word goes back to a more ancient Semitic word for mushroom. Consequently, they were picking mushrooms in the morning, okay? I don't make statements lightly off the top of my head. I have done 35 years of research into ancient theologies. I ask only for my audience to hear what I am saying. I can prove it anytime afterwards, but I'm asking you to just listen. Mushrooms have been used, now if we can drop this down a little bit, hopefully. Mushrooms have been used in the ancient Middle East, in the ancient cultures of the world. The mushroom was always called the food of the gods. If you can drop that down just a shade bit more so we can see the headdress. Okay, here is the high priest of Israel wearing the headdress, and you'll see it. It's in the appearance of a mushroom. Incidentally, the reason why priests wear long robes and why the robes of the Catholic priests are black, because black was a color assigned to Saturn. And the priests wear a long robe because it's the robe of a female. Consequently, it's a male inside the female dress. He's standing in for the female goddess. That's why men wear female robes. Judges wear female robes. They come out with a long black robe as the priest wears the black robe. Just as when you graduate from university or college, you wear the long robe. The robe is a robe of a female. Godly wisdom was always called in the ancient Greek Pistis Sophia, or feminine wisdom. The female was always the holder of divine wisdom, not man. That's why our very earth is called Mother Earth. And the reason why we have God the Father, why is God the Father? Why couldn't he be the Mother? Quite simply because the ancient Sumerians said that the rain that fell from heaven was the sacred fluid that came and impregnated Mother Earth. Therefore, it must come from the male God the Father, impregnating Mother Earth. Back to the mushroom and the priest who wears the woman's dress. Here is a committee of mushrooms. There's another bunch of them. That gentleman on the other side looks like he's been on it for a while. A very powerful display the volcano is. The volcano, and incidentally, the reason why volcanoes, we're going to show you how it was worshipped, but why it was worshipped. The volcano always pictured male and female sexual climax. A volcano was an explosive fire, like, come on baby, light my fire. It was an explosion of fire. That's why the volcano was the holy mountain, or the fire of God. Okay, that's why on men's restrooms today, on men's restrooms in restaurants and hotels, you'll see a triangle. And on women's restrooms, you'll see the circle. The circle and the triangle are very important to a cult in the ancient secret societies. However, the volcano, like any other impressive and fearful aspect of nature, volcanoes have been the object of worship for human beings for the earliest Stone Age. Originally, the Yahweh of the Old Testament seems to have begun as a volcano god. Mount Sinai, where Moses encountered him, was the seat of the Midianite god before him, who was formerly dwelt in the volcano. He was also identified, Yahweh was also identified with the local moon god in the ancient world named Sin, after whom the mountain was named. Therefore, there was a moon god worshipped in that area called Sin. The appearance of Yahweh as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And that comes from the Bible, Exodus 13. The appearance of Yahweh is a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. The word volcano comes from the Latin volcano god Vulcan, and this is important. The word volcano comes from the Latin god Vulcan or Vulcanus, derived from the old ancient Cretan deity Vulcanus. Remember again that we're saying that the appearance of Yahweh in the scriptures in Exodus 13, he appeared as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. That's what volcanoes look like, as a pillar of cloud by day and a fire by night. Here we have one of the footnotes, and I have about 50 of these, but I only put a couple in. Footnotes from the Bible, and I believe this was in Job 37, where it talks about God thundering, and the footnote says that thunder is called kulath, or in Hebrew, voices, for it is considered the voice of God. So when you hear that the great prophets of old heard God's voice, the word is kulath in Hebrew, which means thunder. That being true, I've heard God many times. Okay? Thunder is called kulath. Voices is considered the voice of God. Here is another. In chapter 37 of Job, the footnotes read, the storm, the clouds, God's tent, gathered as the thunder, the voice of Yahweh roars. They descended and God shoots the arrows of his lightning. From the Hebrew Targum, the midst is translated his smoke. Later, his thunderbolts. Later on, God thunders wonderfully with his voice. So we're talking about a God who thunders with his voice and sends lightning as his arrows, and his smoke rises in his appearance. That's what you get with volcanoes, is lightning and thunder and a lot of smoke. We're told that Moses went up into the mountain and saw a burning bush. The whole damn mountain is burning. Okay? Of course you would see a burning bush. And it says that he went up and came back. Moses came back with his face glowing. You try going up to a volcano and see if your face don't glow. Right. Here we have Mount Sinai. Jehovah performed signs, and the mountain trembled and smoked all over. Millions saw and heard proof that what Moses had made known in God's name was the word of God. Here we have the Israelites at Mount Sinai. Does this appear to be a volcano to you? Here we have Jehovah led the sons of Israel to the mountain named Sinai in the desert. And there he gave them his law. And this is what I'm concerned about, because America's law is based on the old Mosaic law. Consequently, in this country, if you get in trouble, they say that you have broke the law, like Moses threw down and broke the law. The sheriff was the six-pointed Star of David, the sheriff's badge. Our whole judicial system, we call it in California criminal justice system. It's not American justice, it's a criminal justice system. Law in America is based on the Old Testament. And all I'm saying is you had better do your homework and find out where all of this stuff is coming from. Let's go on. Here we see at Mount Sinai, he gave them his law. Does that appear to be a volcano to you? These are from random pictures from random church publications, okay? Here from the Encyclopedia Judica, we have the different holy days each year. All holy days in the Hebrew calendar are based on astrology and the months of the year and the seasons of the year. We have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Hanukkah, which is the Christmas celebration, or the celebration of the winter solstice. Then you have Passover, and on the bottom you have the Feast of the Giving of the Law. The Feast of the Giving of the Law, of course, is at Mount Sinai. Does that appear to be, does that appear to be a volcano to you? With God thundering with his voice and the lightning of his arrows, and we're to fall down and be frightened to death of this God of the volcano. Here we have part 2. On the old, there is an old ancient benediction symbol. Benediction is a blessing. When the Pope gives his blessing, this is a blessing from the papacy, which is in fact an ancient Masonic symbol. And of course, the Roman Catholic Church is nothing more than a Semitic Masonic movement coming out of the Middle East thousands of years ago. That's why the Pope wears the yarmulke. Okay? We have the benediction symbol, which is a blessing symbol, as I said, from the Pope. And of course, Catholics will cross themselves like Pharaoh of Egypt crossed himself on the chest. But this is the blessing that the rabbi gives at the temple. You'll see the strange configuration of the fingers is the blessing. Here is the, indeed the Lord is high, and yet he looks upon the lowly. I've often wondered, considering the mushrooms and the hallucinogenic, if that's why the ancient priests were called high priest. Here we have another mushroom head blessing everyone. The Pentateuch scroll or crown with hands raised in the priestly blessing. This comes from Germany. It's the Pentateuch scroll or crown with hands raised in the priestly blessing. Oh, good. Had this one upside down. So is religion. Is someone changing that back there? Yes. Good. Beautiful. Okay, here is the rabbi. Not to be singled out, because the Catholic priest also wears the black robe. So does the judge in a courtroom. But here we have the rabbi giving, of course, the blessing again, the benediction symbol, and remembering, of course, that we're talking about Vulcan. If you understand that our Western religion goes back to ancient England, at least 500 years before the birth of Christ, to a group of religious people called a church or a religious group in England called the Druids. And the ancient Druids had magic practicing priests who worked their magic with magic wands, like Merlin the magician. You recall that? Magic wands were always made out of holly wood. Peace unto you. And send a check. Now we're told in Hollywood about Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You can't understand the Last Crusade if you don't know nothing about the First Crusade. The cup of Christ is the cup of the Grail in which the wine of Christ was held. The cup of the Grail symbolizes the female womb under which the blood, the holy blood that brings life. The Grail is the female womb, and of course that's what all men are after. Now we have the Holy Ark. The idea of the Ark of the Covenant was copied. The idea of the Holy Ark of the Covenant was copied from the Egyptians, the Akkadians, and the Chaldean Ark shrines, which held sacred fetishes usually of a sexual nature, and were borne by poles passed through the rings in the side. We've seen the Holy Ark of the Covenant. Actually, the Ark, if you'll go back and research it, you'll find symbolized the female womb. We've been told a lot of things and been sold a bill of goods by our so-called government. And until such time as we wake up and find out who we really are and where all of this stuff comes from and why secret societies and fraternal orders are operating behind the scenes, and there ain't no women in these Masonic orders. Okay? And I'm going to tell you something. I'm tired of hearing about the holiness of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormon Church, the Seventh-day Adventists, the Christadelphians, the Worldwide Church of God. And you better find out where the checks are coming from and what connections can be made between these organizations and MI5 and MI6 in London, England, and where the money's coming from. And you better find out what the Rothschilds and the international bankers in New York, the Empire State, have to do with religion in this country. Better do your homework. Here we have the idea and the concept of the angels on top of the mercy seat. And I've often wondered, is that why guys say mercy when they see it? Okay, here it is again, the mercy seat. That's the way it looked in Egypt. The female opening of her box has nothing to do with anything holy. Here we have the Yonai on the left-hand side. We have it with the young girl, and the young Hebrew girl when she becomes a woman, celebrating the bat mitzvah, the female opening. Here's the African celebrating coming out of the womb. It's a very old and ancient. Here's the ancient Hindu god coming out of the womb. Here's Jesus coming out of the womb. Here's Mary, she is the womb. Incidentally, that's why in Washington, D.C., we have a Washington Monument. The Washington Monument is an Egyptian obelisk. On each side of the openings of the ancient temples, not all of them, but most of them would always have twin phallic pillars on each side. In the Egyptian convention, or the Egyptian idea of twin phallic pillars, which we have here, twin phallic pillars. The Egyptian idea or convention of twin phallic pillars at the temple gate were copied by the temple at Jerusalem, where the right pillar was named Jachin, which means God makes him firm, and the left pillar was named Boaz, meaning eagerness and strength. That's coming from the Bible. So there were two phallic pillars in Jerusalem. One's called Jachin, which God makes him firm, and eagerness and strength. What are we talking about here? God makes him firm, okay? Here is the temple built by Solomon, and you'll see the two male phallics. God makes him firm and eagerness and strength. Here it is again, the twin phallic pillars. Now, to understand this better, here we have a ground plan of the temple, of the intercourtyard of Solomon's temple. You'll see the holy and the most holy, and the outside covering. You'll see Jacob and Boaz, okay? The inside was the holy, then there was a curtain, and then behind it was the Ark of the Covenant with the Shekinah light, not Shekinah, Shekinah light. Now, if you understand what all of this meant, we're talking about the holy temple of Jerusalem now, in Jerusalem, in the state of Israel. Incidentally, it's not called the country of Israel or the nation of Israel. Like the state of Nevada, it's the state of Israel. You better find out why. Here in that most holy of all holy places on earth is the great Solomon's temple. With Jacob and Boaz, God making it hard and firm, and the other one, eagerness and strength, we have the holy and then the most holy. It doesn't really make sense until you see it this way. There's a world of difference between spirituality between you and your Creator, and between man-made sex, drugs, rock and roll, and mushroom religions. And until such time as you understand that we're not in tune with God, because we don't know God. That real creator out there is waiting for us to wake up. And if we don't do it, it's going to do it for us real soon.